Hey guys, welcome back to another podcast. Well, many of you might not know this, but actually one of my closest friends here in Japan is Blue Ninja. Unfortunately, he lives over in Chiba and I live near Osaka. So we've only met up a couple times, but he's a really easy guy to talk to, and I do consider him one of my closest, if not my closest friend in Japan. Anyways, the other day, Silver sent me a message, and he posed an interesting question to me, which I've been thinking about a lot. And he asked me, he said, I've always wondered what it's like to be a white guy in Japan, because as a black guy, I only know how it is as a black guy in Japan. And I wanted to answer his question, but it was a little bit difficult because on the flip side, I only know what it's like as a white guy here in Japan, and I can't compare that to being a black guy because I've never been a black guy. So in this podcast, which Blue Ninja was nice enough to participate in, we decided to talk about three topics in Japan. One is employment, two is how Japanese people react or treat us in general, and three is girls. So I'm going to start off by talking about employment and my experiences with employment. Okay, first I want to add one more element here. I'm actually an older foreigner here in Japan, and I think there is a big difference. So when I share my experiences in this podcast, I'm going to be comparing myself to when I was Blue Ninja's age. So I think Blue Ninja is 30. I think you're 30, right, man? I'm going to compare my late 20s, early 30s self to you. Okay, so talking about employment, I noticed that when I was in my 20s, when I first came here, all the way up until my mid-30s, it was very, very easy for me to get a job. Now, there might have been some conditions that have nothing to do with being black or white. For example, early on, when I was about 29, I got my permanent visa in Japan, and that makes a big difference because a lot more opens up to you in terms of employment opportunities when you have a permanent visa and the company doesn't have to sponsor you. But just being absolutely frank here, I felt that being a young white guy, and I do emphasize white, I felt like there was some discrimination, but not a negative discrimination. Like, it was discrimination for sure because I was white, but it worked to my advantage. I really felt like being white was just like when I walked into an interview or when I randomly walked into a school to inquire about employment, I felt like being white was just like alarm bells went off in their heads and they were like, oh yes, we want to hire this guy. Real talk right here, not trying to sugarcoat it or anything like that. I would say that being young preceded being white. So the best thing you could be was young. And then the next best thing you could be is white. I know that sounds so racist, but that's how I perceive it. And Blue Ninja, you might agree with me. I'm not saying personally that that I think that's the way it should be, but that's the way I've experienced it here in Japan. I'm trying to think if my educational background or my qualifications to teach English have had anything to do it. Right off the bat, I got sponsored for a job here, and that's how I was able to, I actually came to Japan on a tourist visa, so I could only stay for 3 months. And about 2 weeks before that 3 months ran out, actually the first company that I interviewed with hired me on the spot. They talked to me like for 15 or 20 minutes. There was the owner of the company and two of his assistants. And after sitting there, I showed up in a nice suit, really nicely dressed. And we talked for 15 to 20 minutes, and the owner said, this is the guy. And I really felt, at that time I didn't realize it because I was so new to Japan and so naive. But looking back, on my many, many years here, it just make sense to me. I mean, I was a young, good-looking white guy, and I hate to emphasize the white part, but it's true. That's the kind of racial discrimination there is here. Now, I don't know how it would have gone if I was a black guy, but looking back on it, I really feel like I had an advantage because I was white. I ended up not keeping that job for too long. The next job I had was at a chain school here called Berlitz, which is it's a upper class school. I don't know how to describe it. Upper class, high quality school. It's not the easiest job to get. So that was my second employer. And just having that on my resume, I think, helped a lot for me getting future jobs, because most people in Japan know that school and they know that the hiring standards are really high for that school. And also they give a really good training program to all the teachers, which is similar to a TEFL qualification. So I had that going for me. It is possible to get jobs here without a college degree. You know, that's if you come under different circumstances, like if you're coming on a student visa or a spouse visa, for example. But I didn't come under those circumstances. I want to say that if I had to place an order of things, I want to say that the most important thing that mattered was that I was young. Second was being white. And third was my educational background and qualifications to teach English. So that was basically my experience all the way from when I came to Japan when I was 24 up until I basically left Japan to go to Thailand about a year ago. It has always been extremely easy to get a job. I mean, there's been very few times where I went to an interview and I didn't get hired. So I personally feel, and I don't know if other white people feel like this, but I can only speak for myself, I personally feel like there is a huge racial discrimination here, especially in the English teaching world, for white teachers. So anyways, I'm going to now hand this over to Blue Ninja, and let's hear his take on it.
Well, first, let me stop you on saying my age. I am not 30, Ryan. I'm still in my 20s, so get that straight. We got to start this off on the right foot. But anyways, in all seriousness, concerning the job stuff, you have way more experience with me than getting a job in terms of getting a job in Japan, because I've only gotten 2 jobs working in Japan, and that's pretty much been it. I applied for another one, a third job, and I probably could have gotten it. It felt like I was going to get it. I had a good interview, but it was fine. It didn't feel like race brought too much of an issue. When working as a teacher, I don't feel actually any types of discrimination towards being black as something that holds me back, or it looks like as a negative faux pas. I think the only thing it does play in on is just the overall maybe image of expectation of maybe where you're from, and this falls into all general ideas of how people view you in Japan. It's just like if you were a young white guy, you get viewed as you have that automatic American or England. You automatically put it right in as an American, whereas someone from England. Whereas interestingly enough, when I go to my schools, and this isn't even in terms of getting a job, but as an ALT now, I'll go to my schools and I'll ask, well, where do you think I'm from? What country? What English-speaking country? And usually some get America, but a lot of times you get Africa just because you're black. They're like, oh, Africa. Like, come on, man. First of all, Africa's not even a country. Like, you guys need to be taught properly. But they'll say, yeah, Africa, or they'll, South Africa, or they'll go to, what's an interesting place they said? Oh, Brazil, which is really interesting. I've gotten Brazil before. But in terms of getting a job, it doesn't seem to play so much of a thing. But I've heard that, from what I've heard, it plays a think the race does play a factor in just the image of what they're trying to sell, because I think people, when they think English, they automatically think America or England, and they don't think a black guy from America, right? That's really what happens.
No, there was a time when we never let go, never let